Her hands won't stop shaking. The gondola creaks, suspended over a ravine so deep the bottom disappears into fog, and something is wrong. The cable groans, the cabin lurches sideways, and for a second, Madeline forgets how to breathe. Her vision narrows at the edges. The world shrinks down to the metal floor under her feet and the drop beneath it. Across from her, a stranger she barely knows is trying to talk her through it, telling her to picture a feather, floating up, down, up. She doesn't know it yet, but this moment, trapped, terrified, 10,000 feet above solid ground, is the same fight she came to this mountain to have. She just didn't expect to have it with herself. To better understand this story, let's rewind. Days earlier, at the base of Celeste Mountain, none of this seemed real yet. She arrives with a duffel bag and no real explanation for why she's here. Not to anyone else, and barely to herself. An old woman living alone near the trailhead warns her that the mountain isn't what it looks like, that she might see things she isn't ready to see. Madeline laughs it off, half out of nerves, and climbs anyway. A bird teaches her how to scale the first cliffs. A rope bridge collapses under her within minutes of starting. She nearly dies before she's even begun. And somehow, that doesn't stop her either. Text flashes on screen, almost like the mountain itself is speaking to her. You can do this. She presses on into the forsaken city, a half-built ghost town some corporation abandoned decades ago. And it's here she meets Theo, a laid-back tourist more interested in photographing the ruins for his followers than actually summiting anything. He asks why she's climbing. She deflects. He shrugs it off and keeps talking anyway, unbothered, the way people are when they've never had a reason to guard themselves too closely. It's a small moment, but it plants something. Proof that not everyone up here is running from the same thing she is. There's a particular kind of loneliness in doing something you can't fully explain. You tell people you're just going for a walk, or just picking up a new hobby, or just needed a change, when the real answer is heavier and harder to say out loud. Madeline never tells Theo why she's climbing, because she doesn't fully know herself, only that something in her needed this, specifically, and not a version of it that made sense to anyone watching from the outside. We do this constantly. We reach for the goal before we understand the ache underneath it, hoping the achievement will explain itself in retrospect. Sometimes it does. Sometimes climbing the mountain is the answer, even if you can't articulate the question until you're standing at the top of it, looking back down at everything you outran to get there. The city gives way to the old site, an abandoned settlement half swallowed by the mountain. And this is where the real story begins. A figure steps out of the shadows, identical to Madeline in every way except her eyes and her voice and the venom in it. She calls herself part of you. The player has already started calling her Badeline. She doesn't fight Madeline with fists. She fights her with truth, twisted just enough to hurt. Needling every insecurity Madeline has been carrying since the trailhead, then chasing her through collapsing ruins when words aren't enough anymore. Madeline barely escapes. By the time she reaches the Celestial Resort, a hotel that hasn't seen a real guest in decades, she's rattled. And that's exactly when she meets Mr. Oshiro, the hotel's ghostly, painfully anxious manager, desperate for her to stay. The place is buried under years of clutter and neglect, and instead of walking away, Madeline stays to help him clean it up, room by room, even as he insists, a little too forcefully, that everything is already fine. It isn't. When Badeline finally corners them both and tears into Oshiro for pretending his falling-apart hotel is something worth staying in, he doesn't hear it as help. He hears it as an attack, and he turns his fear into rage, chasing Madeline across the rooftop until he finally, exhaustedly, lets her go. Mr. Oshiro spends the entire chapter insisting he's fine while the walls around him are falling apart, and Madeline spends that same chapter pouring her energy into fixing someone else's mess instead of her own. It's an easy trade to make. Helping another person feels productive, generous, even noble, and it conveniently postpones the harder work of looking at what's broken in your own house. There's real kindness in Madeline staying to help him, but there's also something quietly familiar about choosing someone else's crisis because it's less frightening than your own. Oshiro isn't a villain here. He's a mirror, just a blurrier one than Badeline. He shows what happens when you convince yourself that clutter is comfort, that fine is a place you can live in indefinitely if you just never let anyone see the mess. Madeline can't fix him. Nobody ever really fixes anybody. But she can be honest with him, even when it costs her. And eventually, so can he in his own way, in the years it takes him to sweep his own hotel clean. Past the resort, the wind gets sharper, the paths narrower, and an old woman, the same one from the trailhead, reappears, almost impressed Madeline made it this far, offering her one last chance to turn back. Madeline refuses, and that refusal leads her straight into the moment we opened on. The gondola, the ravine, Theo across from her making small talk to keep things light, until Badeline appears out of nowhere and the cabin starts shaking, and something inside Madeline finally cracks under the pressure she's been climbing with the entire time. The panic attack on that gondola is one of the most quietly accurate things a video game has ever shown. Not the shaking cabin, the tunnel vision, the way the whole world narrows down to a single point of fear until nothing else exists. Theo doesn't fix it by telling her to calm down, because that never works on anyone. He gives her something to do instead. Picture a feather, follow it up, follow it down, breathe with it. It's a real technique, the kind therapists actually teach, and the game's creator has said openly that much of this came from personal experience, not research. That detail matters. This wasn't written by someone imagining what anxiety looks like from the outside. It was written by someone who's been in that gondola. And that's why it lands the way it does. Because the game isn't interested in curing Madeline in one scene. It's interested in giving her and us one tool that works just long enough to take the next breath, and then the one after that. The gondola reaches an ancient temple carved into the mountain's mirrored halls, and here Theo gets pulled into the glass itself, trapped inside his own reflection, until Madeline shatters it to free him. That night, camped out on the mountainside, she finally tells him the truth she's been avoiding since the Forsaken City. About the other her, about what she's really been carrying up this climb. It's the first time she's said any of it out loud to another person. But confession doesn't mean resolution. Later that same night, she goes looking for Badeline. Not to make peace, but to tell her she doesn't need her anymore. Badeline doesn't take it well. The mountain itself seems to agree with her, and Madeline is hurled straight back down to where she started. She wakes in a cave at the bottom, furious and humiliated, and finds the old woman waiting for her again. Not gloating, just quietly suggesting something Madeline hadn't considered. That Badeline isn't the enemy sabotaging her. That Badeline might just be scared, and scared people don't respond to being discarded. They respond to being heard. So Madeline goes looking again. This time not to get rid of her, but to apologize. Badeline doesn't believe a word of it, and the mountain erupts into the one real showdown of the entire game. Madeline chasing her own reflection through collapsing rooms, not to destroy her, but to catch her. This is the part of the story people carry with them long after they've forgotten the platforming. Madeline never defeats Badeline. She was never supposed to. The entire climb, every instinct built into how these games usually work, tells you the shadow self is a boss to beat, a problem to eliminate. And Celeste quietly refuses that ending. The victory isn't erasing the anxious, doubting part of yourself. It's catching up to her long enough to say, I was wrong to try and leave you behind, and meaning it. That's a much harder thing to animate than a boss fight, and it's the reason this story resonates with people who've never picked up a controller in their lives. We're taught constantly to treat our anxiety, our fear, our doubt as an enemy combatant, something to defeat, silence, optimize away. But the parts of us we try hardest to amputate tend to just get louder, chase us further, show up again in gondolas and mirrors and hotel rooftops until we finally stop running and turn around. Integration isn't as cinematic as victory. There's no explosion, no final blow, just two versions of the same person standing in the wreckage of a fight neither of them wanted, finally agreeing to climb the rest of the way together. And they do, literally. Madeline and Badeline merge their strength, gaining the ability to dash twice through the air instead of once, and together they push through the final stretch of the mountain, past miniature echoes of everything she's already survived, until they break through the clouds and stand finally on the summit. It's not a cathartic explosion of triumph, it's quieter than that. Just two halves of the same tired, proud person looking out at the view they climbed all this way to see. Back down at the base, everyone gathers at the old woman's house. Theo, Oshiro, Badeline, all of it. Madeline bakes a pie from the strawberries she collected along the way and hands out slices to the people who, in their own broken, complicated ways, helped her get here. It's such a small ending for a story this heavy. That's exactly why it works. Celeste never pretends the mountain was the hard part. The mountain was just the shape the difficulty happened to take. The actual climb was learning to stop treating the worst parts of herself as something to outrun. Most of us don't have a literal mountain to prove that to ourselves on, so we invent smaller ones. The degree, the relationship, the habit we swear we'll finally break this time. And most of us, somewhere along the way, meet our own version of Badeline. The voice that shows up right when things get hard, listing every reason we should quit, dressed up as protection but sounding a lot like cruelty. The instinct is always to fight her, silence her, leave her at the bottom of whatever mountain we're climbing. Celeste suggests something quieter and much harder, that she doesn't leave because you win. She leaves because you finally stop treating her like an enemy and start treating her like exactly what she is. A scared, exhausted part of you that never wanted to hurt you, only to keep you from getting hurt again. So maybe the question worth sitting with isn't how to defeat that voice the next time it shows up on your own climb. What would happen if, instead, you turned around and asked her what she's actually afraid of? I will read you in the comments, and thank you for watching.